Hello, everyone, and happy Asian Pacific American Heritage Month. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. We're just about to get started. Um, but first, a few words about SAPAC. I'm Katie G. Salisbury, board president of the Stanford Asian Pacific American Alumni Club, also known as SAPAC. Established in 1989, SAPAC has historically been one of Stanford University's largest ethnic affinity groups and one of the largest alumni organizations with nearly 3,000 members. We are dedicated to connecting Asian American and Pacific Islander alumni to the university and to each other. Membership empowers you to attend numerous events in your region, like the one tonight, engage with a thriving alumni community, and receive the latest communications about our alma mater from an AAPI perspective. So, if you are a Stanford alumni who is tuning in tonight and you're not already a SAPAC member, we highly encourage you to join the club, which is free. And you can sign up for a monthly newsletter that has all the news and events that we're working on. So, to learn more about that, about SAPAC and how to join, you can visit our website, sapac.org, which we will also drop in the chat. Now, for tonight's program, Growing Up Chinese Restaurant Kids, a panel discussion with Stanford alumni. As many of you know, Chinese restaurants are ubiquitous with nearly 47,000 in the United States. That's more than McDonald's franchises, and each one has a story. Many of our fellow Stanford alumni have roots here. And tonight's event features a panel of Stanford alumni who grew up in their family's Chinese restaurants. Our featured guest panelists are Buck G, class of 1972, Harry Chang, MBA 1990, and Janice Lee 1998. Their experiences span generations, diasporas, and regions throughout the country. And before I briefly introduce each of them, I just want to say that we will be reserving time at the end of tonight's event in the last 10 to 15 minutes for comments, questions from the audience. So if you have thoughts, feel free to drop them in the chat or in the Q&A function, and we will hopefully get to those by the end of the event. And now, without further ado, I'll introduce each of our panelists for tonight. So although Buck G graduated from a small high school in Oroville, California in 1967, he was well prepared for Stanford, getting his coterminal BSEE and MSEE degrees in 1972, later going on to his MBA at Harvard Business School in 1980. But nothing could have prepared him for his 5 years playing baritone horn in the incomparable Leland Stanford Junior University Marching Band, having fun running around the field in 2 Rose Bowls, beating heavily favored Ohio State and Michigan, and serenading topless nightclub dancers in the streets of North Beach every year before a big game. He
True.
grew, he grew up in Tong Fong Lo in Oroville, California, known in town as Charlie's, which was his grandfather's American name. Harry Chang's work career has spanned a diverse range from accounting, consulting, private equity, corporate management, and real estate, but his real interest is in food and wine. He attributes his love of cooking and eating good food to his many years of restaurant work, with the first being at Canton Restaurant, Kwang Tong Lao, his uncle's restaurant in New York City's Harlem neighborhood. Janice Lee is the founder of Ikena Strategy Consulting, a practice that focuses on supporting women and minority-owned founders with strategic growth planning and execution. She is a second-generation Chinese American from Toisan and grew up working at her family's 3 restaurants in Los Angeles, named King's Restaurant after her grandmother. And on her bucket list is to travel throughout China, learning how to cook different regional dishes. And so, welcome, all of you. Thank you for joining us tonight. It's so great to have all of you here. As we were speaking about just before the event began, this has been a highly anticipated event. So, I think people are really interested and probably have a lot of things to contribute to this as well. So, to get started, I'd love for each of you to tell us a little bit about the restaurant or restaurants that your family operated, where it was located, and how your family came into the business.
So, we starting?
Yes, yeah, go
Okay.
ahead. Feel free to go ahead,
So,
Buck.
um, so the family lore is that about 1920, my grandfather, who actually jumped ship to come to America, got together in Oroville. Oroville, is a small town in Northern California, just north of Chico, Paradise, Yuba City, is nearby. Anyway, so the family lore is that the four Chinese guys, bachelors in Orville, put together $10 in the middle of a pot, and with the $40 decided, well, let's start a Chinese restaurant. So that's all we know of the history. Sometime around 1920. Um, Father came here in 1937. He went through Angel Island, was a paper son. I was born in 1949, and there are pictures of me um, sitting in the dust of the new grand opening Chinese restaurant you see here. So that was built around 1950, 51, the Tong Feng Lo restaurant, that one. So that's when it was called Charlie's Restaurant. My grandfather knew Charlie's. So I was born in 49, and then they put up a new restaurant probably in 51 because there's me sitting in the building as they're structured, sitting in some mud or something. Um, and then that was so I grew up in the restaurant, and my father ran the restaurant till about 1993, and we sold it because he basically had a stroke, and so he sold the restaurant. So we ran the restaurant from some 1920 to 1993, sold it, and it's still there, run by another family, doing just as well.
Wow, incredible. Janice, do you want to go ahead?
Sure. Um, so my family opened their first restaurant in Los Angeles. My grandparents had actually had a restaurant in Honolulu prior to this, but my dad got a job working as a mechanic, an airline mechanic for Western Airlines. So he moved the whole family over to Los Angeles. And in typical immigrant fashion, decided, well, we need more. So they decided to open their restaurant King's about 6 months after I was born. So I always kind of joke with them that there's no baby pictures of me because basically the restaurant basically took over their lives at that point. Um, but we did grow to, I think, three restaurants across Los Angeles and Orange County, and it certainly kept us busy.
Wonderful. And Harry.
Yeah, so my family emigrated from Hong Kong to New York City in 1967. And this was, 2 years after the immigration floodgates opened, and there was a preference for family reunification. So my uncle took advantage of that, and he brought over my mom, my dad, and all seven siblings. And the restaurant, and we all worked at the restaurant. And it was in the heart of Harlem on 125th Street. And that was the first, actually, of three restaurants that I worked at up until junior high school.
Wow. So I'd love to just hear a little bit from each of you about, what it was like growing up in and around the restaurant. How much time did you spend there as a kid? Were you there before and after school? Did you have specific tasks that you were responsible for? And did that change over the years? Yes, Buck, you want to go ahead?
Yeah, actually, I saw actually I had a comment. So Janice, you had a menu up, all you can eat for it was like a buffet, five
It's
dollars and
five.
16 cents.
Yeah. I can't remember when that menu was from, but yeah, it was certainly a
Yeah.
bargain, I think,
Now,
even
now
at that
I'm
time.
older than you, but we had a regular plate of chow mein, egg foo young, and sweet and sour pork for $1.25. And the bigger portion was 250, and the bigger portion for that you get a bigger portion of chow mein, egg foo young, fried rice, and prawns.
Mm,
So and that was mostly what we sold, chow mein and egg foo young.
the staples.
Um, but in terms of growing up, yeah, my father was a cook. My mother stayed home with nine kids. So she didn't work the restaurant, but we have to get a couple of other Chinese cooks, had to get them from Chinatown in San Francisco because we were the only Chinese family in town. And everybody knew us. A small town in Orville, like 10,000 people. Everybody knew you. Everybody knew my father, my grandfather, and knew his kids. So yeah, it was fun. And we just did, we peeled the shrimp, cooked the rice, made the noodles for. Actually, we had to make the noodles for chow mein. You had to make the dough and cut it up. So we did all the stuff in the back. But they didn't. They didn't let us. They didn't let us cook. And my father had us doing the cash register because he didn't trust white folks with his cash.
I think I had
Does
a
that sound similar
similar.
to?
Yeah, well, I mean, the restaurants really dominated our lives, like even just kind of not only physically being there. So we were there after school. We had a house that was built in the back of our restaurant where my great grandfather lived. So we would kind
Right.
of go there after school, have a snack, and then, wander into the restaurant and, get assigned different tasks. Um, but yeah, similarly, at the age of 10, I think I started at the cash register once they they figured I had mastered enough math. And then when I was a teenager, started actually waitressing, which I completely hated because it just was um, you just see so much that I have so much respect for customer service people and wait staff these days,
Mhm.
just through that experience. But just I think in terms of just dominating our lives outside of it, when I was little, I remember thinking that normal families had dinner at 10 p.m. And because my parents would close the restaurant, they would clean up, and then they would take us to Chinatown to eat actually like real Chinese
Hmm.
food, because we mainly served Chinese American food. And so we would eat dinner at 10 p.m. in Chinatown and then go home and
Hmm.
go to sleep. So it certainly dominated all aspects of our lives for sure.
So, Janice, you started at 10. That's
Yeah.
pretty late. So,
I was a underachiever, I guess.
believe it or not, I actually started working in my uncle's restaurant when I was 5. Um, so after school, I was at the restaurant probably about 4 or 5 hours a day. First, I had to do homework, and we actually ate dinner. There was a big table in the center of the restaurant that probably had about 16 seats, and my entire family and most of the staff would actually eat dinner, and they would cook obviously different food than what was served at the restaurant. So steamed whole fish, fresh vegetables, like a regular Chinese restaurant. But my task started. I really went up the curve. I started with menial tasks like refilling the salt and pepper shakers, the sugar containers, cleaning the tables, to, as Buck mentioned, peeling shrimp on the weekends.
Yep.
We're talking about 100 pounds worth of shrimp, and then peeling 100-pound sacks of potatoes. I actually still have scars on my thumbs from peeling too fast and shaving off part of my thumb. To later on, as I got older, I started doing other stuff like butterflying the shrimp, deveining them. And then when at my brother's restaurant, when I was a little bit older, and when times were a little bit slower, I would actually do some of the cooking. So it was so I would do the egg foo young. I would wrap the egg rolls. So it was everything from salt and pepper shaker and cleaning to cooking later on. Yeah, so I kind of did everything.
So I tell you, I mean, we never cooked. We had Chinese cooks from San Francisco, but in watching them, what I learned was, this is actually easy to cook and easy to do. And so sometimes I will cook chow mein for my friends because I know how to do it, or egg foo young. In fact, I had some Chinese friends who said, I've never had egg foo young. What is it? And
Well,
so we had an egg foo young dinner here
yeah.
a couple years ago.
Oh, actually, I want a clarification, Buck. So at my uncle's restaurant, when I was in elementary school, I wasn't allowed to cook. I did cleaning, I did peeling shrimp, all of that.
Mhm.
But at my brother's restaurant, it was a takeout restaurant,
Mm.
and so when I did the cooking, the customers didn't know I was doing the cooking.
Well, so Jana said that she hated waitressing. Harry and Buck, were there things that you hated doing or loved doing out of all the different tasks that you got used to contributing?
Yeah, sweeping floors.
Yeah, the definitely. I really appreciate the hard work that it takes to run a restaurant because as I got older, I actually would stay to close up the restaurant. And on the weekends, when I would do that,
Yeah.
the restaurant closed at 2 in the morning. And so I would
Um,
sweep and mop at 2 o'clock in the morning. That was not fun.
Yeah, we had a buffer. We'd buff our floors. So one of the big buffers you drive around, and yeah, we have to do things like that. So yeah, and
and
I
that's every
remember
day, right? Every night.
every night, every day. So yeah, I learned that. I never wanted to run a restaurant after seeing what work it did. I mean, I work hard now, but not that hard.
So before we move on to the next question, I actually want to read a few comments that have come in that I think we're having a technical issue, so not everyone's able to see them, but I wanted to read them. This is from Jeannie King Llewellyn, class of 1970. She says, she's representing Rickshaw Restaurant, San Mateo, California. Sold the business to a partner after her dad passed away in 1989, and five of them worked as quote slave labor. Um, they bought the restaurant because, I guess her father had to feed five kids. He figured he'd just run a restaurant. He was an electrical engineer and an innovative thinker, as well as coming up with leading edge offerings on the San Francisco Peninsula. Thank you, Jeannie, for sharing that. And then we also have a comment from someone else. I don't have their name here, but they say that they are a Triple Crown Cantonese Chinese American winner, laundry kid, grocery store kid, and restaurant kid. Wow, that is a Triple Crown.
Mm.
And all of the businesses dominated their lives. They lived behind the grocery store until they went to college. Yeah, so thank you for sharing those stories. So there's a lot of people who have similar stories to tell, which is I think why this is such a special event. So let's talk a little bit about the food that your family's restaurants served. Were there specific dishes that they were known for, or like things that were especially popular in your town or neighborhood?
Oh, I can start. By far, the most popular were the combo dishes. So you would have an entree, whether it be, and shrimp was really popular, whether it be fried shrimp or shrimp with lobster sauce. So you have an entree and then a huge scoop of fried rice and a big egg roll. And that probably outsold everything like 2 to 1 because it was a great deal too. I can't remember how much it cost, but it wasn't very much.
I said mine. It's $1.25 for chow mein, egg foo young, and sweet and sour pork.
Nice, classic.
I
The cost.
think for us, so we had this buffet restaurant, and so we would change the main dish every day of the week, I think. And I think by far the most popular was like barbecued spare ribs. But I think people also knew us because we had this really strange salad slash dessert bar as well that had I think it was macaroni salad, so it was kind of a carryover from our Honolulu days.
Mhm.
Jello, um,
Mm.
applesauce, and then strangely enough, like Swedish pancakes. And I asked my
Mhm.
parents about that, and they were like, yeah, well, because, we moved over here and so auntie and uncle also, they ran a Swedish buffet in West LA. And so we thought we should also have Swedish pancakes. So it was a very strange hodgepodge of, things, but so we were kind of known for, having that odd assortment, but also like the Chinese American food too.
Oh,
But by the way,
Katie.
go ahead.
Oh, actually, I want to tell you about my favorite, and it's actually egg foo young, because I don't remember that from growing up in Hong Kong. And then suddenly there was this, like, what's this thing called egg foo young?
Right,
And actually,
right.
I really liked it. And
Yeah,
I enjoyed making it. It's basically
yeah.
a fried Chinese omelet.
Mm.
And I loved it. So I would make it for myself all the time.
Let me add to that because, um, we lived in a house where my mother would cook. My mother was traditional Chinese, and she cooked real Chinese food, and so the Chinese food that my father cooked, chow mein, fuyang, we never got that at home. So going to the restaurant and eating a restaurant was for us a treat. So I love American food. That was my American Chinese food, and I still do.
Do you guys have a favorite or favorite order that you still get?
You
Well,
know,
I
My
my
mean, egg foo young.
Well, I don't do egg foo young anymore because. But anyway, when I go to a Chinese restaurant, I still, what I consider Chinese soul food is juk.
Mm.
Yeah, it's just I just have a craving for that every once in a while. I'll make it myself, but
Yeah.
sometimes I'll go into a restaurant. It's like that's what I want.
No, I'll get chow mein. I'll get chow mein and sweet and sour pork. How can you beat it?
Same here. I think on occasion I'll indulge in that, but I my kids always want to go to Panda Express, and I'm like, no, I
Exactly.
can't. I can't.
I was actually the opposite as a kid because I grew up in the San Gabriel Valley where when I was growing up, they have great
Yes.
Chinese food. And so
Yeah.
when my mom, who's the American born Chinese in our family, she would always want to go to Panda. And I was like, not Panda again.
Hmm. Hmm.
Let's have some real Chinese food.
Yeah, it's a whole
Um,
other thing.
yeah. But now now you've got the Panda Inn, which is like the revamp of the original restaurant that started the whole Panda Express. And
Mm-hmm.
Hmm.
so anyways, it's, Chinese food is always popular. Um, so I also wanted to ask each of you, I've done a little bit of journalistic work on Chinese restaurant workers more recently, like in the last 10 years, and interviewed different people and talked to, people from all over the country. And one story that stuck with me was a young woman who said, I think she grew up somewhere in the Midwest, and maybe similar to your family, Buck, their family's restaurant, they were the only Chinese family in this town, right?
Yep. Yep.
And but they were still part of a network of other Chinese immigrants and families who ran restaurants, across the Midwest. So they would sometimes drive hours just to meet up with those families and, kind of have that common connection. So wanted to hear a little bit more about the restaurant and your family's relationship to the local community that you were in, and also like what that was like for you personally. Like, did your school friends and teachers know that your family had this business? Is it something that was a part of your life, like outside of the restaurant?
So I grew up in again a small town, Oroville. When I was in high school, there were about 300 people in my class. And small town, everybody knows you. And when you're the only Chinese restaurant in town, you know,
Hmm.
people go to Chinese food there, and they all know people. And because it's so old, all the adults went there as kids, and so they grew up generations. I'll two stories. And so my father and grandfather were popular. In fact, one year they were the grand marshal for the town parade that they do every year. So yeah, so they celebrated them. Yeah, and when you're only Chinese family in town, people know who you are. I mean, right? And so it was great. Forget the I forget the other story I was going to tell you, but I mean, so yeah, everybody knew them, and they would always they would walk around town, and the adults say, "Oh, you're Charlie's kid. You're Charlie's kid. You're Charlie's kid." So yeah, you're there, and it was fun.
So, Katie, you mentioned network, and I actually have a bad story about network. You know that a lot of the restaurant workers are and were illegal immigrants. And I remember as a kid that every once in a while we would be subject to ICE raids. And the network is that there would be a telephone network that if our restaurant got raided first, we would immediately call the next restaurant and call the next restaurant to alert them so that the workers who are legal immigrants would actually go home. So that was, and anyway, that was one of the things that I remember that was not so good. But it really was everyone trying to help out. And my uncle would hire people, from his home village who had made it over, to the U.S. So he always had at least one or two people working for him who were not who were here illegally. In terms of the community, I think my uncle had been in that neighborhood for about 30 years, so everyone knew him. And he was always, doing. Well, I remember like when we had bake sales at school, he would do the Chinese steamed cakes for me to bring to the bake sale, and then all my friends, knew where to find me. So yeah, we were definitely part of the community, even in a big place like New York.
Mm.
That reminds me, Harry, you just triggered a memory that, yeah, when my kindergarten teacher would ask parents to bring in like cookies or snacks or things like that, I would always be really embarrassed, just even as a kindergartner, with my parents bringing in like trays of egg rolls to feed all the kindergartners. I mean, I'm sure they loved it, but yeah, it's just, I think even though I grew up in Los Angeles, the town that I grew up in Redondo Beach, didn't have that many Asians at the time. So people definitely knew who we were, and we were, I think, the only Chinese restaurant for at least, in our part of town. And so everyone knew who we were. I remember always feeling really embarrassed when I would see a classmate come into the restaurant, because it was like it was just typical kid stuff, but also like I was working, and sometimes they were kids that I didn't even really like, or they were teasing me at school or something. But they would come in, and it was just this very strange dynamic, because we were outside of where we normally interact with each other, and the kid, was with their family, obviously, and just everyone felt like they were just acting different. So it was interesting to kind of be a part of the community in that way, where it just felt very, very visible. And I think at the time, being one of the few Chinese kids or Asian kids in my school, I think it made me feel uncomfortable. And I look back on that now and I kind of shake my head, but it was just like, that's kind of how it was.
I don't know, one comment to follow up on Harry's comment about illegals. Yeah, my father was an illegal. My father came in Angel Island, and the relevant story is that in 1960, he was the paper son, and one of three sons of this illegal, of this Chinese guy. And they confessed under the confession program. If you remember the confession program,
Mhm.
they confessed. And so my father had to confess in 1960. Um, but and so, but he confessed. My mother confessed. My brother confessed. But they all said, "You're all good citizens," and they're granted basically not asylum, but they said you can stay here, and eventually became citizens. So most of the Chinese that I knew, and I didn't know this, that I didn't find this story out until 20 years later, because no one talked about it. But I suspect that all my relatives that I saw in San Francisco all had the same issue. They're all illegal immigrants.
Right. Well, and I think it's important to just for all, I mean, I know you guys are all aware of this, but just to recognize that the reason a lot of people had to come here through other means is because the US had created immigration laws specifically to ban the Chinese, right? For primarily racist racial reasons. And so the community kind of used their inventiveness and ingenuity to find other ways to come in as paper sons, to come across the borders, things like that. So I mean, I have people in my family who were paper sons, and that's how we came here. So yeah, I mean, thinking about things that are going on now, it's uh, these things have been a part of our history for a long time. So it's really powerful to hear you guys talk about them as well as part of your own stories.
It's a bit of promo here. And when I found that out, I joined the Angel Island Immigration Station Foundation, became president for 10 years. For those people who haven't in the Bay Area, if you haven't visited Angel Island, go visit Angel Island and find the history about the Chinese immigration in the early 20th century.
So before we move on to another question, there are a few more comments from people, and I don't think all of them have been able to share to everyone in the chat. So I just want to read a few of them. We have a comment from Cheryl Lee who says her grandfather came to America in the late 1800s. After winning the Chinatown lottery, he was able to bring a wife to America and open not one but two restaurants in Harlem. Okay, so in your territory, Harry, which her mother says enabled their family of 10 to survive during the Depression. Wow. And then Adam Toe has written that his parents' restaurant in La Jolla, California, started the year he was born. They ran Miss China for 32 years from 1975 to 2007. It was a very small restaurant, only 10 tables, but had a dedicated following. And people still ask about the restaurant. There's a brunch place at that location now, but they still ask about it 19 years after it closed. So that's some following. So many good memories of food there. He remembers packing pine nuts, folding napkins, and putting chopsticks into paper holders. Let me see if there's any few other ones. And then we do have another comment from Jeannie, who says after decades of opening their restaurant, they had some loyal customers. They had a number of rice plate menus. And the kitchen would know who came to dinner based on the numbers ordered. So that's some pretty regular customers. They had some real characters as customers, like one who invented a TV that can rotate sideways so he could sleep and watch TV on the sofa. Unsurprisingly, he was a bachelor. Some of their wait staff were interesting. One was a traveling reporter from Hong Kong who reported his restaurant experiences through cartoons he drew and sent back to Hong Kong. His name was Bill Yim. One of the things that she misses and hasn't seen lately is pressed duck with sweet and sour sauce and crushed peanuts. Does that ring a bell to any of you?
Oh, that's way too high end for my uncle's restaurant. Way too high.
Us too, absolutely not.
Too fancy. And then she says dim sum was also introduced down the peninsula when her dad and his business partner would make an early run up to San Francisco Chinatown to pick up dim sum goodies to sell at their restaurant on the weekends. Very fun. Okay, so
I'll say one thing then with regard to getting Chinese stuff. So actually, when you live in a small town in Oroville, this is before you had any sort of Chinese goods in grocery stores. So we would have to drive up to San Francisco once a month and get provisions to cook Chinese food. My mother grew bean sprouts in our backyard, and we use that for the chow mein. But everything else, we'd have to drive up to San Francisco to get. No, you can't get soy sauce in Oroville, things like that.
Oh, Buck, that reminds me of something else that I did for my uncle. So, all of the shrimp and the potatoes and all the meats, he would order wholesale. But things like some of the produce like lettuce and tomatoes and lemons, my brother and I actually would go shopping down at Delancey Street, and we would bring a big shopping cart. And I started doing that when I was 7, riding the subways by myself, to go shopping at Delancey Street to bring produce back to my uncle's restaurant.
And you're talking about Delancey Street on the Lower East Side, right?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So yeah, for those who don't know New York, Harlem and Delancey, like opposite ends of Manhattan.
So you had a shopping, you take a shopping cart, you roll the shopping cart down
Oh, yeah.
New York.
Yes. Mm-hmm. That's how people in New York shop. I mean, you don't see shopping carts anywhere else but in New York. But that's what I did.
Mm-hmm.
I think it was once every 2 weeks, my brother and I would go down to Delancey Street to do the produce shopping.
We were fortunate in LA to have a lot of suppliers of Chinese groceries, but I distinctly remember we would just make our way to Chinatown with my grandma's like old station wagon, and then on the way back, this is before they had all the seatbelt laws, like my little sister would have to sit on top of all these cases of frozen pork butt. And and then we would just like travel back down to Redondo Beach to once a week. So
I mean, my father had to, and his cooks, we would get these, I would say pork butt. We get these, basically pork butts, and they with fat and everything, and they cut off all the fat and to make lard, right? I don't know if he did that. And then with the chitlins, when the basically the dried stuff after all the fat comes, we'd bag them up and people come in and take them. I mean, because
yeah, that's good stuff.
we didn't eat them.
So I think this is going to be my last question, and then we'll open it up to the audience because I think there's always already a few questions for everyone. So, having spent so much time in your family's restaurant, what are some of the important lessons that you learned by being a part of the business? And did the restaurant would you say it influenced your college choices and your career goals, or I'm sure it influenced your life deeply in many ways, but I'd love to hear a little bit more about how it did so.
I can start. I think it was so many things, right? I mean, just about a lot of grit and hard work and determination. I mean, I think that's an immigrant story, right? But there were times where the restaurants weren't doing well. In fact, by the time that I was ready to be college bound, I was actually supposed to go to Cal, and my parents told me, we don't have enough money to send you, and so I ended up, it was interesting, just kind of it was a whole experience of just like, I just need to work as hard as I can to try to figure out how to get into a 4-year school, and then eventually ended up transferring to Stanford. So, I mean, I think that was something that was direct that really I carry with me to today. In fact, I feel like sometimes I have to learn how to not work so hard, but it's just ingrained. Um, and then just I think it's just a spirit of entrepreneurship and the belief that you can do what you want if you work hard enough. And yeah, I mean, I think those things are things that I think will never leave me. But did it influence my choice of schools? So when I went to a community college and took way more classes than I should have, but just worked my butt off, and got into a lot of different schools, and including some East Coast Ivy schools, and that's where I wanted to go, mainly because I just wanted to be, I had been around my family for so much and just, working so hard in this environment. I felt like I just needed to have something different. And then the compromise was to go to Stanford in California.
How did it change me? Uh, yeah, working with the waitresses, um, and working for minimum wage with tips, it made me appreciate them to this day. I totally empathize with the underpaid workers. They work so hard, and for not for peanuts, but I mean, not very much. And they depend on that. So I appreciate the value of tips and what they do. I think um, the other thing, not per se about the Chinese restaurant, but certainly about the family history is I still suffer from imposter syndrome. I am so lucky. We started so low, and I'm so lucky to go to Stanford and do so well and blah blah blah. And I still feel like I'm still a kid, in the Chinese restaurant.
Yeah. Well, there are many things that Janice and Buck said that I echo. From the grit, right? I'll add to that. It's kind of the community, right? Everyone just really pitched in, and uh, if there was work to do, you did it, and you didn't complain. But going back to what Buck said about the appreciation for service people, I think definitely as a result of my experience working in all these restaurants, that I became a pretty good tipper because I recognize that people work their butts off and they're not appreciated. So yeah, there are a lot of things, but those are the things that stick out. Um, in terms of my choice of college, having grown up in Harlem, and the restaurant was only about maybe 8 blocks or so from Columbia. That was the one school that I told my mom I was never going to apply to.
Same here. I was like, I'm not applying to UCLA. Sorry.
Some things are just too close to home.
Yes.
Yeah. So we have some questions from the audience. We've got one from Dan Kojiro. Thanks, Dan. So while at Stanford, did you go off campus for Chinese food? And if so, where did you go? Did your upbringing influence your judgment of those places?
Ooh. Well, I won't talk about Stanford, but I remember going to a trade show in Knoxville, Tennessee, and I was working the booth with with my colleagues, and I said I'll volunteer to go to lunch, to take lunch to everyone, and they said, oh, we really want Chinese food, and these were Caucasians, right? Oh, we want Chinese food. So I looked up on Yelp what was the best Chinese restaurant in Knoxville, Tennessee, and I went there, and I brought it back, and I immediately apologized to my colleagues. I said, this is pretty bad Chinese food. So it's didn't even compare to the Americanized Chinese food that my uncle's restaurant had. At Stanford, though, I don't think I ate a whole lot of Chinese food. We really didn't have a lot of choices near campus, and I didn't have a car.
No, and I don't think, I mean, I think being Cantonese, there weren't a lot of Cantonese restaurants near campus. Like I think we would occasionally go to maybe it was like a Hunan restaurant or something like that in Mountain View, or occasionally go all the way up to the city and have Cantonese food. But being from LA, where there's a Chinatown and in the San Gabriel Valley and things like that, it certainly wasn't like as plentiful up there.
I guess at Stanford, I wouldn't eat American food. After growing up and eating, my mother would be cooking Chinese food all the time. I want to do something different. So I love pizza and hamburgers, which because never went out, right? So I find finally a chance to eat some stuff I was not allowed to eat when I was a kid. Pizza and hamburgers are great.
So another quick comment from Jeannie, who's going back to life skills. She said that she tells her kids that if they can survive 6 months working in a restaurant, they can handle anything in life, not just at work. So that's something, it seems like something you guys would all agree with.
Yeah, for
Yes,
sure.
I agree with that. All the hustle bustle around you and just focus on what you're trying to do. Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah. I had to do my homework in that environment. So yeah, I would sit in one of the booths, and that was my homework center.
So question from Roger Yang. What do the panelists think of some cities moving to ban gas stoves? It seems that it would impact Chinese restaurants the most because Chinese
Right,
restaurants stir fries rely on woks and
right.
extremely high temperature gas burners.
Oh, it wouldn't be Chinese food because you know that term, right? It's called wok hei. It's the wok energy, and
Right.
you're talking about how many BTUs? It's
I know.
it's
It's a lot. It's like twice as much as you get on a. You can't get on. You can't get on a. Can't even get on a stove, on a gas stove.
not even close. Not even close. Yeah, yeah, yeah. You would not be
But you
able
survive.
to do real Chinese food without a wok, and with a wok, you can't. You use electric. No
I
way.
get close. I get close. Good enough. You're good enough.
Uh,
I still cook Chinese food. I mean, you know, the actually the one thing that I learned is is that so I saw my father, men cooking and men cleaning. So I'm the cook in our house, because it's no big deal. And I
Love
cook and
that.
I cook in my wok, my wok. At least I have
Okay.
gas. At least I have gas.
So we've got a bunch more questions and comments coming in. Ahmed asks, how did your upbringing impact your academic choices, extracurriculars, and some social interactions at Stanford?
Bringing um so so on a personal note, so we're the only Chinese family in town.
Mm.
And so and so I didn't shy away from that. And I took it. I won't say I had to prove myself, and maybe that's what drove me, but in everything, um uh uh being student body president in high school and being dorm president at Stanford, it drove me to be different, and being different didn't I didn't shy away from that, and I pushed that difference. Or say another way, sometimes I say, I'm not different, I'm just better than you.
I don't think it, for me, I don't think it influenced academic choices. I think I certainly shied away from anything kind of restaurant work oriented, that kind of thing for a very long time until I realized sometime in my 20s how much I actually really enjoyed cooking and food. Um, because it was just my family's love language, right? We didn't say I love you, we said, have you eaten yet? And I think as I started to get older and moved away from home, that I started to kind of realize that more. So I think, intentionally or not, I think I really stepped away from it while I was in college and thereafter, but it came back.
mm. Yeah, I agree with Janice. I definitely did not, working in a restaurant did not influence any academic choices that I had, but I will say that it influenced my circle of friends, and I really value diversity because growing up in Harlem, um, we were one of two Chinese families. And so my friends growing up were Blacks and Puerto Ricans and Dominicans and Trinidadians. It was everyone but Chinese. And that was one of the things I really, really valued. And to this day, and that's one of the things that I really loved about New York in general, but definitely about the neighborhood that I grew up in.
Are there parts of your experiences having grown up, at your family's restaurants that you've tried to impart to your children or to the next generation? Because I think most of your families ended up selling the businesses, right? So are there things from that whole experience because your families might not have grown, your children, if you have children, would not have grown up with that. Are there ways that you've tried to keep those stories and experiences alive?
Yeah, I think I'm fortunate to live near my parents, so I make sure that my kids spend a lot of time with them. I think, my kids, especially when they were little, I mean, I think they're so spoiled because it's like, okay, their parents work at a desk in front of their computer. It's a pretty different experience from seeing, hard labor. And, my dad will frequently bring up, he's like, how do you teach your kids to kind of respect that, hard work and and I have to explain to him, I'm like, hard work takes different forms and it's going to look different. And I think the best thing that I can teach them is just about perseverance, which I think is just, times where you just give up. Like I just use my family as an example. Like none of us would be here if they gave up, you know.
I think, Katie, from my experience, I really developed a love of food and cooking. And to this day, I love hosting dinner parties and I'll cook, and my kids learn from that. And both of my kids really, really like cooking. And when my daughter visits me, they're both adult kids, but when my daughter visits me, we will cook together. We'll cook and bake together. So I really look forward to that. And yeah, I think that's probably what they got from my experience, is imparting to them the same, and they're both foodies too. So they love good food and they love to cook.
So my story is a little bit different. I mean, when uh, our kids, when my generation grew up, we all moved away from Oroville, and and most of them went to Cal. I was the oddball going to Stanford, but but I all grew up and had kids, but every Christmas we would come home to Oroville, and at least, and they would, and that big family on Christmas. And we'd eat in the restaurant, of course, it was there. Um, but a big family thing. And then later on, when my parents died, uh, uh, I try to keep that family get together every Christmas thing together. So we still do that. Now we do it at my house, and they're now, kids. Now I'm older than you, 60 of us for dinner in my house. And that's, my generation, my kids and my grandkids get together. And so my takeaway from that, growing up in a town, where we're the only people there, is a sense of family. And that's what I'm trying to maintain now that my parents are gone. And yeah, every Christmas they're all here, and they all learn about this family stories and things, and so we pass it on that way.
It's really beautiful the way these experiences have all become a part of your lives and your children's lives and your family's lives in different ways. I think that's important. I think it's a huge part of restaurants have been an economic lifeline for our community for many, many generations. So thank you all so much for sharing your stories tonight. I'm going to share one last comment I guess there's maybe a question and a comment. Dan Kojiro just says that when Buck was at Stanford, the Asian population was in the 3 to 4% level.
Right. Yeah, that's right. Remember, in my generation, Asian was about 2.5% of the U.S. population. In Stanford, it was about 4% at Stanford. So we're overrepresented even then.
Mhm.
Yeah, in my dorm, there were three of us out of 40 people. There were three of us my freshman year.
Oh, wow. And then let's see. There's a question from Jeannie. She says, "Were you all around in the restaurant or specialized?" Oh, I think in terms of tasks. She says that her brother and her were in the front wait staff and cashier, while her sisters were in the back in the kitchen cooking with the main cook. So I guess the question is, it sounds like a lot of you did a little bit of everything, but maybe some of you had specific responsibilities at different times.
We 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 like I said, we ran the cash registers because my father didn't trust the white folks, and we swept the floors.
Yeah, I did everything. And at my uncle's restaurant, which was the largest one, and the only one that was not takeout only, I was mainly cleaning and doing the weekend chores. For the other two restaurants that I worked in that were takeout, I would mainly be the order taker, and then also help to close up. And then at my brother's restaurant was the place where I actually dabbled in, being the cook.
Yeah, I did a little bit of everything, but I was never allowed to cook.
No cook, right? No cooking.
Unfortunately.
And no one ever sent an order back that I cooked.
Oh,
Nice.
that's impressive. Well, thank you all so much for joining us tonight. I also want to give a shout out to Tony Tong, who couldn't be here tonight, but he organized this event. This was his brainchild. And I'm so glad that he did and got all of you together. I think it was really fun to hear all of your stories, and I know people enjoyed it. So thank you so much.